Hey, Creep Cult, welcome to your weekly Patreon bonus episode. We are continuing with Alphabet Roulette, and this week, for E, we talked about Eraser. I guess we're going to talk about Eraserhead.
In heaven.
Oh, get it.
Everything is fine.
Wow. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I don't think the Pixies could have done it any better.
I sound just like the girl in the Radiator. So this, if I don't get picked on the wheel for any other movie for the rest of the alphabet, the fact that I got to get you guys to watch Eraserhead is good enough for me.
So good.
Never need to pick another movie after this.
Yeah, so if you don't know, this was directed by David Lynch in 1977.
If you've seen anything more than a second of this movie, you will 100% know that it could have only been directed by David Lynch.
From visionary director David Lynch.
I mean, actual, literally visual.
Stars Jack Nance?
Jack Nance, yeah. See, I
said Nance.
Yeah, I realized where I got confused before I said Jack Palance, but it's Jack Nance.
Jack Palance.
Close enough.
There you go.
But yeah, like you said.
And it's his first movie, his feature film directorial debut for David Lynch, which is pretty fucking crazy because this movie has so much goddamn style. Whether or not you like the style is a different question. It's got style.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to Harry Potter, like we were talking about before, that David Lynch got style. It's Kingsley Shacklebolt. So if you don't know what this movie is about, me telling you this synopsis here is not going to help at all. Jack Nance plays Henry Spencer, who tries to survive his industrial environment, his angry girlfriend, and the unbearable screams of his newly born mutant child.
That's about it.
Yeah, so it's 89 minutes. It feels a hell of a lot longer than 89 minutes, in my opinion.
There's nothing to dig your teeth into other than visually what's going on. Because, like, if you try to jump into the story, it's not that it's surface level, it's that it's so obtuse that it's hard to really grasp at it.
And the script, and I'm sure you read this too, was only 22 pages. It's tiny. So really, he was banking on the visuals carrying this movie.
They do.
There's 40 minutes of the movie with no talking.
Yeah.
Like total.
Pretty much
the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, pretty much the first act and the last act are almost like without dialogue. But yeah, and that's part of how he was able to pull one over on some of the AFI board members who kind of greenlit this project for him. They were under the impression that because it was 22 pages for a script, and the Hollywood standard typically, or the filmmaking standard is, it's a minute per page of the script. So they're like, oh, this is going to be a 20-minute short film. And obviously it's not.
No.
And before he was going to make this, he was going to make a movie called Garden Back instead of Eraserhead.
Right.
Similar idea, but it was going to be like a weird, obtuse look into adultery with a man who has some sort of like insect garden thing growing out of his back.
Yeah, I guess Lynch did a painting of a guy with vegetables growing out of his back, and that was the inspiration for that version of the movie.
Yeah, and so for anybody who doesn't know, I'm a massive David Lynch fan. Twin Peaks is, probably my favorite show ever, and it's difficult sometimes being a David Lynch fan because he's either an acquired taste or he's just somebody that I feel like you will never enjoy watching his stuff if it's just not your speed. But
I feel like you have to understand what you're getting yourself into. Like sitting down to watch Eraserhead, I was like, I know this is a Lynch movie, so I know it's going to be weird as fuck, and I probably won't understand any of it.
I think a couple things that help with the experience are if you watch interviews or videos with David Lynch, so you kind of get an idea of what, because I mean, we
get an idea of what the weather in LA was like in the 70s.
Yeah, that's the benefit, is like, yeah, you get to see who David Lynch is, and you get some useful information about your day if you live in the LA
or a
area.
random jar of weird liquid.
Yeah, so you would watch that and go, I don't know what the fuck this is about, and that's pretty much all of his stuff. And then the other thing that helps is to know kind of like how his process works and where he gets his ideas. So
from
dreams,
right?
Yeah. So he on this movie is when he really got into transcendental meditation. He has always really pulled from dreams, and then also his experiences with living both in like an idyllic suburban upbringing as a child and then living in a really like fucked up, I believe it was part of New Jersey, where there was just a lot of crime and horrible things happening, and that gave him this kind of like dual vision of how the world is, and you see that represented in most of his work, but mostly things like Twin Peaks, Blue Velvet, where you have this like kind of beautiful veneer that's hiding some dark underbelly. Eraserhead doesn't really do that. Eraserhead from the beginning is like you're in this like creepy industrial like who knows world. But yeah, he pulls a lot from dreams and really just connects random ideas together. I guess his inspiration for this was he just had a dream about a little boy finding a man's head in the road and turning it into pencil erasers, and from there he built out this entire story, and he kind of just seems to bring in whatever themes he wants to and like kind of magically force them to work, in some way, in a way that
depends on who you ask.
Yeah, but I think that's also the thing that's great about being a David Lynch fan, is that with something like Eraserhead, you don't have to just take my word for it. You can take the word of like some pretty fucking amazing filmmakers and artists who have been inspired by his work.
The reason why we're able to watch it on HBO Max for this watch around, if you don't have it in your own physical library or whatever, is because it's part of the Criterion Collection. I mean, you don't get to be part of the Criterion Collection for no reason at all.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I hadn't really read too much of the trivia about this, surprisingly. I thought that I had, but and I mentioned some of this to you guys, but Stanley Kubrick, we had talked about earlier, was heavily inspired by Eraserhead. He actually showed the movie to the cast and crew of The Shining to get them in the right mood for making The Shining, which is insane because that's another one of my favorite movies. John Waters, heavily inspired by Eraserhead with Pink Flamingos and Female Trouble.
Mel Brooks, right?
Mel Brooks, because he loved Eraserhead so much, ended up. And this is this weird Mel Brooks thing where he just has a strange fascination with body horror because he not only produced The Fly, but he also produced The Elephant Man.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he that's how he ended up being involved in The Elephant Man. George Lucas saw Eraserhead and actually approached David Lynch to direct Return of the Jedi. And Lynch was like, "Yeah, no." This
Imagine
is
how would I do Dune instead?
How fucking weird would Return of the Jedi have been if Lynch was at the helm and was given more than a tiny grain of creative
Well, it's one of those
freedom.
what if scenarios where like Star Wars could have definitely gone in a crazy direction. It reminds me of like Halloween, where if they had stuck with the like Season of the Witch and then anthology going on, if like each new Star Wars was in a radically different style, and kind of like we've been talking about with the shows and stuff, where we would love to see somebody with like a really distinct style take on a certain comedy or drama aspect. But anyway, I also mentioned to you guys that H.R. Giger cited Eraserhead as one of the greatest films he had ever seen, and said that it came closer to realizing his vision than even his own film work. David Lynch.
Parts of this movie that you can see specifically at the beginning and then a little bit more toward the end, where there's this thing. I don't know what it is. Do you know what that is? Like comes out of him.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like
a xenomorph.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Lynch ended up declining working with Giger on Dune because he felt that Giger had stolen his ideas, which is insane. I never knew that. But yeah, I wanted to ask you, because you were asking what that thing was in the beginning. Do you guys have any sort of like semblance of an interpretation about what this movie was about, outside of the surface level? Like, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. Like, do you have an idea of the message Lynch was trying to communicate?
So this is my interpretation of this. I feel like it was about like the current state of the world and how like nonchalantly people have children, even when maybe they aren't prepared to do so, and about how like awful someone can be when they don't want to be a parent. I feel like the view that he has of this baby, this fucking weird snake pterodactyl thing that doesn't have any skin, is more in his head, and he's an asshole to this baby because he doesn't want this baby and he doesn't want this life. He wants this other, the pretty girl across the hall, or the girl in the radiator, or whatever.
Yeah.
So you think that what we're seeing as this mutant baby is his projection of his internalized feelings.
Yes.
About his relationship with that child.
That's how I vibe with it.
That makes sense. I was trying to figure out what was happening as soon as it started.
Yeah.
And I almost felt like we were outside of space and time to start in a weird way, right? And then we see this deformed man sitting in a window. And to me, that was like a creator, like a god.
Yeah.
And then when whatever comes out of Henry, that thing, was like him taking his soul and then like birthing that into the world. And then that's like the beginning of that life.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was like, okay, is this him like creating something? And then now we're going to follow that being. And so I was trying to run with that, and then I just lost track of it because there's so much going on. I feel like this movie could be dissected for decades, which I think it has been. So that was my idea, was like this guy that, because I don't think we ever see him again, was like a creator.
We just see him at the end when all of his gears are starting to spark and shit and things.
Right,
are,
yeah.
like,
So then he's
apart.
like pulling things. Yeah, and so, okay, yeah. And so I was like, I think he's creating something, and then we're going to follow that.
Yeah.
Because we get, then it's like that weird, I don't know. It's just so weird because it's like in space.
Yeah.
To some degree, super strange.
So I was going to make a joke of like sitting here going, oh, no, you're wrong on that. Oh, you're wrong on that. You're wrong on that. But the fun thing about everything that Lynch does is that your interpretation is equally as valid. You know, this was the first time that I really was able to sit down with it. Having seen it, I think this was my third time around. And actually, to me, I feel like I have a pretty good handle on not everything, but a pretty good handle on a lot of what's going on in the movie, or like what Lynch is trying to say. To me, like you said, John, the whole thing is about fatherhood, and it's
Right.
about a fear of fatherhood and sexuality, which feels very David Lynch. And I know that he was inspired by his daughter, Jennifer, who has since gone on to be a director as well. She, I think, was like 8 years old by the time that this movie came out, and she was born with severely clubbed feet and had to get a lot of surgeries. And he, at the time, did not feel like he was prepared to be a father, and there was a lot of fear behind that. So I think a lot of that translates into the movie. But yeah, in the beginning, I think it also helps a little bit to have watched the newest season of Twin Peaks, the one that came out on Showtime, because he introduces a lot. He like revisits a lot of Eraserhead elements, and the whole like being out in space, and like there are these figures who are kind of like turning the cogs of reality, and they are kind of like a god figure or whatever. So yeah, I think that is what it is that the man with the gears, the man in the planet, I think is what he's called. He is kind of like the god figure, and that thing that comes out of Henry's head is basically just a metaphor for his jizz.
Yeah.
It's just supposed
Okay.
to be his
The sperm.
and that's why it looks kind of, like a gross sperm. And then the planet is very egg-like, and you have like the sperm thing land into the
Right.
pool and kind of inseminate the thing.
Quickly, did you know that it's not the sperm that wins? Did you know that the egg will zero in on what it thinks is a good sperm from the group that's coming to it, and it will steal that one?
If it doesn't happen in the intro to Look Who's Talking, I don't want any part of it.
If it doesn't happen in the trailer to see the Chucky, I don't want to know about it.
yeah.
But to me,
I appreciate it.
to me, that's even more reason why women just rule the world. Yeah,
And-
it's just
and
because they
men
literally,
rule,
they
literally.
make the decisions from before you're born.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that happens, and then I think that there may be some stuff going on about because of the weird state that this world is in. I don't know how much of it is in his head, because that's my interpretation too, is that all of the stuff with the deformed baby is more in Henry's head than it is in reality. But you also get the whole thing of him going to the ex family's house and having the dinner with them, and the father talks about how they've like engineered this new form of chicken.
New
And
chicken.
yeah, when he tries to go eat it, it like
like-
moves
like-
and bleeds and all this gross shit. And so I was like, oh, maybe because Henry had sex with the woman who's part of this family, like maybe she ate some shit, or some experiments happened in this industrial world that like made her baby deformed. Like maybe her father has something to do with it. So there's some rabbit hole to go down in that direction, but I tried not to get too into that because I think that's more of a red herring in terms of like what the movie is actually about.
I
But
love that scene when the mom starts like kissing on him, and he's like, what's the girlfriend's name or whatever?
Mary.
Yeah, he's like, Mary?
But yeah, you see that he's very awkward in any sort of like. I mean, obviously, it's very awkward to have your girlfriend, soon to be wife's mother, come up and just start making out with you, and that's very Lynchian. The way the characters are very just like direct and weird, and just acting completely oddball. But he's very afraid of just sexuality in general, and kind of mortified about the idea of talking about it with the mom. He's like, I don't think that that this is appropriate. Like, blah blah. Doesn't even want to talk about it. He's right.
I mean, that is a weird conversation to have with.
Yeah,
if she's pregnant, I think you can make
put
that
two and two
there.
together. Yeah.
Well, and then you get like he's got that little worm that he carries around that he eventually like puts in that box and seems to be kind of like safeguarding. To me, that was supposed to represent like his manhood, like his dick basically, and he doesn't like want to give it up sexually. Like he doesn't want to be a part of being sexual, so he like hides it away in this box to like protect it. But then later when he goes to look at it, it's like it's taunting him by like literally it's going into holes and out of holes, and it's basically having a little orgy inside of this box. And he's being like taunted about this, like, oh, you're a sexual creature, you need to be sexual, and he like doesn't want to do it. And then obviously with the baby, he is, pretty much everybody is like repulsed by it, but he is not ready to be a father, and eventually gives into the temptation to kill the baby, and ends up doing that. And to me, that's when you see the gears of the man and the planet start sparking and stuff, because it's almost like he's committed a sin against God. Like,
he's spitting in the face of his creator.
Yeah, and even though it's not something that Henry ever wanted, was this child or any of this stuff, but that happens to a lot of people in real life. It's not always something that you want when you have a child. But you have that, and then the lady in the radiator. People have a lot of different interpretations about what that's all about. To me, it kind of felt like it's a combination of like part of his subconscious does want to be sexually active with the lady across the hall, right. And then like the woman in the radiator is like his subconscious temptation, but that temptation is also so revolting to him that she's got this like deformed face. And so as much as she tries to be like sweet and positive and like, yeah, no, sex is good, she's got this horrific deformed face. And at one point, she's also kind of taunting him, because you see all the little like sperm things falling on the stage, and she's just stomping on them in front of him and basically like taunting his manhood. And when he eventually does kill the baby, she like kind of comes in and gives him an embrace to try to convince him like, oh, you've done the right thing. Like now you can be with me or whatever. But, and then, when he's on the stage and he's doing his whole, there's a lot of pole twisting, which is obviously very sexual. And then literally he gets like a boner that comes out of his head, like a boop, like thing pops out, his head comes off. And then my interpretation of this whole thing is that it's a dream, obviously. Well, not obviously, but it's a dream.
Or nightmare.
Yeah. And maybe he's also afraid that by being a sexual, reproductive member of society, he's just going to become another cog in this like industry wheel of whatever this world is. Because then we see that where it's like, they take his head and they start making it into pencil erasers on an assembly line, and he's part of this machinery, no matter how hard he tries. And so those are all of my very scatterbrained interpretations of a lot of the different elements that are in this movie. But and there's still some things that I couldn't tell you, reasonably what they're supposed to mean. And I could be entirely wrong about any of this, because also the hilarious thing about Lynch is that anytime he's been asked about what this movie is about or any details about it, he basically says, fuck you, I'm not going to tell you. He has a famous quote that I've seen a million times on Twitter, which is him saying, a lot of people are shocked to find out that Eraserhead is my most spiritual film. And the interviewer goes, could you elaborate on that? And he says, no. That's the end of it. He said one of his inspirations was he opened a Bible, read one verse, closed it, and had the whole movie unlocked in his head. So, I mean, he is one of those people who's like, I don't need to talk about the film once it's out. My statement is the movie. It's up to you then to interpret it however you want and try to, figure out what I was trying to say, but also there's room for anybody else's opinions. But also, I just think that the way that this is put together is pretty astounding, like you said, for a first film. He shot it in the stables on the AFI campus.
Over 5 years. Because of budget. He had to deliver newspapers to try to make money. Paint houses.
Jack Nance put in money. And
Sissy Spacek?
Sissy Spacek was the wife of the guy who plays the man in the Planet, Jack Fisk, and so she contributed money to try to keep it going. And then
Crazy.
Catherine Coulson, who was Jack Nance's wife and also played the log lady in Twin Peaks and went on to be like a frequent collaborator with Lynch. She worked on this too, and also worked as a waitress and donated all of her income from being a waitress to try to get the movie made. And yeah, it was a real kind of like grassroots thing that took them forever. Jack Nance talks about how there's one scene in this movie where Henry gets up, walks to a door, opens it, and when he walks out on the other side, a year and a half of real time has passed. So he kept the hairdo for the entire like 5 years that they were.
Christ.
And he actually, Catherine Coulson actually said it's probably the reason they ended up getting a divorce was because she had to keep his hair done like that for 5 years, and it was a lot of like pulling and prodding at his hair. And so she was like, "Yeah, that's probably why we got divorced." But Lynch said that the film's tone was shaped by, like I said, his time living in a neighborhood in Philadelphia. He said at one point. He saw a grown woman grab her breasts and speak like a baby, complaining her nipples hurt. This kind of thing will set you back.
He's such a weird dude.
Yeah. And he also took heavy inspiration from, you mentioned it in text, but from
Rene Magritte, who's also a surrealist just in paint. And
he was also heavily
film.
inspired by Franz Kafka, The Metamorphosis specifically.
Right. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, watching it, I was like, almost every scene feels like a Magritte painting. And I was like, this makes a lot of sense. So when you showed us that picture of the side-by-side of the shots, I was like, well, there you go.
Yeah, everything feels very painterly. I mean, this is what I think black and white is just the absolute best for, is just if you know how you're going to light a scene and you're going to light it very dramatically, then black and white is your friend because
it gives you so much contrast.
Good example of that recently, Macbeth.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I was like,
well.
I was even obsessed with just like how the way the light hits just like the top portion of Henry's hair, so that you have like this dark part of his hair and then this like light part.
He's
on
just
top.
got like a flashlight hidden back there.
Yeah,
like a glowworm.
And then also the sound design is, I think, fucking amazing. There's at some points, I think they said like 12 separate audio tracks, and you got to imagine this is back when they actually had to run these on real machines and not just layer their audio in a program. But there's at some points like 12 layers of different sounds going on, and a lot of this kind of like electrical buzzing and industrial sound is stuff that he would continue on into the rest of his stuff. A lot of it is heavily used in Twin Peaks and in a lot of his movies.
Even some of the sets feel very like Twin Peaks. You know, there was some curtains and some carpets and like a little lounge, and I was like, this feels like it could have been in Twin Peaks if it's not in Twin Peaks.
Yeah, and as part of his experimenting with the audio for this movie, he started experimenting with the backwards talking. And
I did read that, yeah.
Yeah, and he couldn't quite nail it for this, but he ended up obviously carrying it over into being one of the more recognizable aspects of Twin Peaks. But yeah, I mean, I love this movie. I know the first time I watched it, I was very, very confused, and I was like, I'm gonna go watch The Elephant Man, which is a lot more straightforward. But I think that it is a movie that definitely rewards repeat viewings, and also it just, I love that movies can do this kind of thing where it's nothing about it is straightforward, but it's still somehow like, there's something there and it's emotionally affecting you, and it's obviously gorgeously made, and he was able to basically tell a story without telling a story. Yeah. And doing it all basically in a series of weird macabre paintings. And that's really how he got his start, is he wanted to be a painter, and he was just taking a course in film, just I guess to fill a credit, and was about to drop out of it because he thought it was boring, and he just wanted to get the filmmaking know-how so that he could animate his paintings. And AFI was just like, well, we're giving students a bunch of money to film stuff on our campus, so if you want to make something, go for it. And cool. Yeah, and I think something about how weird and eccentric and and weirdly charming David Lynch is, it got him a long way in those early years of getting people behind him and willing to support him for 5 years of making this weird ass movie, and it's paid off, because
it almost reminds me of like classic literature. When you like study that in school, how you have to sit there and dissect, like, what were they really trying to say? Like, if you read Hemingway or something like that, it's like, yeah, he told a story, but there's way more to it. And I feel like this is like the movie version of literature.
Yeah, it's all. I mean, it's like when you wake up from a dream and you're trying to think like, why did I have that dream? Like, what did that?
Was there an alligator in my front?
Yeah, like what did that? And that's what the whole dream analysis thing that people try to, that's the whole pseudoscience of dream analysis. But the fact that he's able to take them and somehow translate them into things that not only work but work on a level that affects people to the point where there are now a million different properties that have been inspired by Eraserhead, a ton of stuff that's ripped off Twin Peaks or been inspired by Twin Peaks.
For example, the show Psych
yeah.
has a episode called Dual Spires, and the father character in that show is named Henry Spencer, which I didn't realize until we watched this movie.
Well, and also like this is just another example of what I love so much about doing this show and also just watching as many movies as I can is it kind of dawned on me the other day that the way that I like think about the film genre is like a giant jigsaw puzzle, and I'm constantly like putting new pieces in place to better understand what the whole picture is.
Like when we watched Dark City, and we're like, oh shit, this actually has influenced a lot.
Yeah, anytime we're able to put a new piece in where I can now understand all the things around it that are influenced by it, I'm like
Pepe Sylvia. We're over here trying to draw red ropes to different pieces of mail.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the credits during Rise of the Planet of the Apes, like watch it spread.
Yeah, but yeah, even like down to the xenomorph thing and being like, oh shit, that makes so much sense. And obviously, Alien and Giger stuff is some of my favorite artistic stuff.
Also very sexual.
Yeah. So this is a very horny movie, but like a
repressed horny,
but like it'll put your boner inside you.
I don't know that I can say I like this movie yet. I definitely appreciate this movie, but I definitely have to watch it again to figure out like did I like this? Do I enjoy this? Or am I just appreciative of the craft and the time that it took to make it? You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, totally.
No, yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is this a movie that, pretty much that exact thing I was going to say, is this a movie that you appreciated but are not interested in rewatching anytime soon?
I am interested in rewatching it, though.
Okay.
Because there's so much here, and it's so weird. But I was basically texting you guys the whole time I was watching, like, this is crazy, this is nuts, what about this?
Yeah, I would definitely encourage maybe going on and watching like a couple more of his movies that came after this to kind of see what he did with, because this is really the most pure distilled like Lynch thing, which I think is why it's still fun to go back and watch, despite it also just being gorgeous and really well put together. But with each thing after that, he does a bit more like, let's try to kind of make this a bit more like a normal narrative, not in any way that actually makes any fucking sense either, but tries to make it a little bit more friendly for people who aren't game for what Eraserhead was putting down.
What about you? Did you like it?
So this is my second time watching Eraserhead.
Oh, okay.
So I was not a super huge fan of it the first time I watched it, but for similar reasons, I was like, this is there's not a lot to dig my teeth into here. There's no dialogue to dissect. It's all just visual storytelling, and it's not telling a story that makes any sense. I was also a lot younger, so getting to watch this now, it makes, like I said, it makes a lot more sense to me. I don't think that I know maybe even 10% of what's actually going on in the movie, but
you know more about space than you do about David Lynch movies.
Yeah, but I do think that there's a ton of value here. I think that like it is a beautiful movie. I think that it has some early like body effects that I think are super well, like the puppeteering and everything.
Yeah, we didn't
super
really
well.
talk about how
he did the effects.
Yeah, and also just still nobody knows exactly how, like, what that thing is or how it was pulled off. He talked about how they just found it. He was like, maybe we found it. Maybe it was born on set. People have theories that it's maybe a skinned and embalmed calf embryo. Other people said that it was partially a skinned rabbit. He blindfolded the editor who was like helping with the dailies so that he couldn't see like the secret behind how they pulled that thing off. Jack Nance just called it Spike and never like revealed what went into it, but it's fucking disgusting.
Yeah.
And also, like, it looks real. I mean, for what it is, like the way it moves and the design of it crying and everything, like it seems like a weird creature in some way, like a real creature. So
yeah, I think the effects work super great. I like I said, I love how heavily contrasted everything is. You get that beautiful gradient that you can only get from a black and white film, where moving from like pitch black into like these like, subtle gray, and then that gray kind of ombres its way into a white. It's a beautiful movie to watch. It's still a lot to chew on every time you watch it, and if you're not paying attention, you won't miss out on things that connect the story, but you may miss out on trying to figure out what each individual scene means. And that can be another barrier to entry for watching. If you're not paying attention, there is stuff you will miss. It's just you're not going to like piece together a story when you get to the end of it.
Yeah.
Even if you're paying attention to the whole thing, you might not be able to piece together a story by the end of it.
Yeah, like I said, I've seen it 3 times and I still don't totally know what's going on. Like, like what I told you, I don't know if that helped you guys at all with like understanding anything that you were maybe confused about. And I'm not saying that my interpretations were. I mean, I could be completely 100% wrong, and David Lynch would probably tell me to my fucking face that I was wrong while putting a cigarette out on me. But
and he'd be like, "Yes,
yeah, I'd be so into it." But I'd be so intimidated to have a conversation with him. I want to so badly, but I feel like I would just be so out of my depth.
You just keep saying the weather in LA, the weather in LA, the weather in LA, just broken.
Yeah. But I've long since given up on trying to convince people to watch Twin Peaks or to get into David Lynch. I think it's really something that, it's best if you kind of stumble into it and, or like, over the years, a lot of people grow an appreciation for Lynch stuff. But yeah, like even Adrienne, I showed her a couple episodes of Twin Peaks and she seemed to like it all right. And, I can do as much of the like, trust me, it gets real crazy stuff. Should just show her that Joe Biden video. That's pretty much just like a recap of all of the wild shit that happens in Twin Peaks. But it's just really something that, I tried to watch Twin Peaks 4 separate times before I got through the first episode, I think. So it's just an acquired taste, and for me, like, I love weird shit that doesn't make sense.
I know there are a lot of people who say that Blue Velvet is like their favorite movie of all time.
So fucking good. Yeah.
He doesn't have a ton of movies that he's directed under his belt. Like, not as many as you think somebody who started in 77 would have. He has a ton of shorts and a ton of music videos.
I think it's because he makes what he wants to make.
Yeah, but I mean, he doesn't have like a ton. I want to say like 10 tops, right? If that.
Yeah, he's not like beholden to anyone.
Yeah,
and I think even if he was, he'd probably tell him to fuck off. But
I think he's made what I would consider to be 2 steps towards going towards a more like commercialized route for his career, which were Dune and Twin Peaks, and he got bit in the ass both times he did. So I have a sneaking suspicion he's just like, I'm going to make cool shit when I feel like making cool shit. And if I can fund it, I'm going to fund it. And that's the end of that conversation.
Yeah, you nailed it. He has 10 movies. He did Eraserhead in 77, Elephant Man in 80, Dune in 84, Blue Velvet in 86, Wild at Heart with Nick Cage and Laura Dern in 90.
Ooh, have you seen that?
I think that's one of 2 of his movies that I haven't seen, actually.
Okay.
Then he did Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which was after Twin Peaks. He did Lost Highway, which is great. Bill Pullman and Patricia Arquette. He did one called The Straight Story, which is actually he did with Disney and is not at all like a David Lynch film. He did Mulholland Drive, and then most recently in 2006, he did Inland Empire, which is just now getting a 4K restoration for Criterion, I believe. And that's like 3 hours long with Laura Dern. And then I guess really his most recent film work was the new Twin Peaks, which is like 18 hours of...
Oh, yeah, because there was a Twin Peaks Missing Pieces, which is supposed to be like lost footage, but also like connecting story bit. I don't know.
Yeah,
I was
have it
reading
all
about it and I was like, what the fuck?
I have it all in box sets, yeah.
So it is like a Twin Peaks movie, but also not like a Twin Peaks movie?
The Missing Pieces is just all of the stuff that didn't make it into Fire Walk with Me that like helps connect Fire Walk with Me to the rest of the series, and then also helps connect it to the new stuff. And it's this whole like I've read books and things. Yeah, like if you get
just in general.
Yeah, if you get really
you have to be a scholar to make this happen.
Well, like if you really want to make an attempt to understand anything David Lynch, but like Twin Peaks, it ends up being Reddit threads and reading books and articles and trying to figure out how all of the different things connect, and then even then they don't all totally make sense. And...
I'm here to lead my my Twin Peaks dissertation.
I would say though, even though I wasn't like fuck yeah, Eraserhead, I would recommend this movie. I think that you should check it out. I mean, if you like surrealism, which I know we all do to some degree, it's there. I mean, it's one of the best examples of that, especially on film. So I would recommend it. Just know what you're getting yourself into. It's weird as fuck.
Totally. Well, thank you guys so much for doing this with me.
I'm glad you won this week. As much as I wanted to watch whatever I suggested.
Exam, I think.
Yes.
And then mine was the Evil Dead remake. I would have also loved to get into some of that.
Yeah, but I thought this was a nice little detour into something different from what we've been doing recently. But let's see if we swing wildly in the other direction to Face Off.
Yes, so this week I have suggested Flash Gordon. John went with
The Faculty.
And Anthony.
Face Off.
Yeah. I'm honestly on board
I'm
for
cool
all
with
three.
any of these. Yeah. Let's spin the wheel of endless possibilities.
I love that sound.
Sounds like a creepy door.
Face Off.
Oh shit! Now I'm gonna win the next 4 weeks in a row. So I got.
I'm getting brutalized out here in the streets, homie.
This was one of my top picks. Right before we recorded, we were debating about which one I was going to pick, and so I'm very excited.
Yeah,
it's been a long time.
Yeah, I watched it a few months back, but I was half paying attention, so I'm excited to rewatch it. This is Nick Cage, John Travolta, and John Woo. So we'll let you know what we think.
So
next time,
count how many doves are flying across the screen.
And all the doves are switching faces with other doves.
That was a seagull. Right on. Anything else you want to say about Eraserhead? Nope. Okay. Well, we're going to watch Face Off. We hope that you watch that and join us next week. Thank you so much for checking this out. And enjoy your bonus episode.
In heaven, everything is fine.
Keep it creepy, y'all.